So today I'm going to be doing a tier list on every Shaman legendary minion. Let's zoom this in a little bit, actually. So there are 55 according to the Hearthstone website. I think there might be more, but if the Hearthstone website doesn't load it, I can't do it. Like, that's been an issue in the past where things like Corvus Bloodthorn didn't show up, and like Cariel Rome, God, I can't talk, didn't show up for the Paladin one. I don't know it's just the Hearthstone website sucked ass. And it constantly needs fixed. Anyway, let's start with naming the tiers. This is something I like to do for every video. So the tiers are S or slash, best, I guess, A slash saw play, B slash fringe. C I like to do as power crept, because there are just minions that are fine, but they're power crept, and then D, suck ass. Alright. So to start off, you have Aya Blackpaw. So Jade Shaman was somewhat playable throughout years and years of Hearthstone. It's ebbed and flowed and wild of like being a kind of fringe deck, and I think that Aya kind of goes in fringe for Shaman. Obviously, Aya was a lot better for Druid, and all the Jade stuff was a lot better for Druid than it was for Shaman and Rogue. So I think it kind of makes sense that Aya is just, fringe kind of legendary. Lurker Below saw a tiny bit of play. 6 mana, 6/5, Battlecry, deal 3 damage to an enemy minion. If it dies... sorry. Here, can I zoom in a little more? Yeah. Repeat on one of its neighbors. So... Lurker Below saw a little bit of fringe play when it first came out, and it still sees a little bit of fringe play, overall, but the card is just, it's weird. It, in all respects, should be a decent card. I think just when it came out in Standard, it was just never had the possibility of being good, and then, obviously in Wild, a card like this only gets worse because it's 6 mana. Flurgle, easily one of the best legendaries in the entire Shaman class. I mean, yeah. Actually, technically, Lurker Below is completely power crept by Perpetual Flame, so I'm going to put it there. But Flurgle is easily one of the best legendaries in the entire Shaman class. When it was at 2 mana, it was so strong. Flurgle Tox at 2 mana was, the same as Dreadscale Bloom, but now that it's 4 mana, it's 2 mana more expensive, but it's still really, really good. Jive Insect is... C play, because it does C play in Standard currently. It's not a crazy legendary spell. It doesn't win you the game. It doesn't set up board states that you could that your opponent can't deal with. It doesn't clear boards that you couldn't deal with otherwise. But it's just a pretty strong card, and I think putting it in saw play is probably the best place. Same with Inara Stormcrash. This card did just C play in Elemental Shaman during United in Stormwind, or actually, I kind of think that was the only deck. It's definitely a lot less overall played than a lot of other legendaries that are going to be in this Saw play tier. But I mean, Elemental Shaman was a tier 1 or 2 deck at the time. It was genuinely very powerful, and people were bringing it to events. So Inara should be brought up just for that. Kalimos, just always a bad card. I mean, it got buffed to 7 mana from 8 during Ungoro Twist, and it's still just unplayable garbage. Genuinely a terrible card. Dr. Holiday, the legendary from Showdown in the Badlands, the Highlander legendary. 5 mana, 4/5, Battlecry. If your deck has no duplicates, equip a Staff of the 9 Frogs. I'll be honest, I thought this card was really bad on release. Not because I thought that, Reno Shaman was bad, but I thought that this card just wouldn't slot in the deck. But, I mean, I guess it's just good enough to slot in the deck because you need 30 cards. And, it did also get nerfed from 2 attack on the weapon to 1. So it is actually significantly worse, but people are still running it. Just getting taunt minions, 3 or 4 taunt minions is pretty much good enough. And, yeah, it's just a good enough legendary, but I have to put it here because it was in a meta warping deck. These cards are were kind of okay playable in Standard. This card is was in a meta warping wild deck, so it has to go there. Glug. So Glug is easily one of the best minions in the entire game for big decks. And of course, Big Shaman exists, so putting Glug in best seems pretty accurate. Big Shaman has had stints of being, one of the best decks in the game. Early the expansion was really fucking broken before the meta really settled. It's still pretty good right now, I would say, Big Shaman. So of course, Glug does that. Obviously, Marabi sucks ass, and it's just unreal. Like, Murabi is one of the worst legendary cards ever printed. It's 6 mana for an understated minion with a terrible effect. I mean, like, what were they thinking with this card? This is one of those classic cases of what the fuck was Blizzard thinking, and then I hate when they do stuff like this, where they're like, oh, this really terrible value shitter minion, and then it's like, okay, well, how does a casual player feel when they fucking unpack this shit? They'll probably want to quit the game. Like, if I unpack Murabi as a casual player, I'd want to fucking quit. Stonewright, easily one of the best Shaman minions ever. It's so good for Even Shaman. It took Even Shaman from being, a pretty good deck, kind of falling off a bit to being fucking gross. Even Shaman has been, consistently tier 1 since Stonewright came out, and it's just really broken. I don't even think Stonewright is one of those cards where it's like, oh, you should nerf it. I think Stonewright is fair. I think the other pieces around it are less fair. Stormbringer, it saw a lot of fringe play in, you guessed it, Even Shaman. It's not a great card by any means, but like, you got to remember that early on, Witchwood, Even Shaman was kind of not that great. It didn't have Chisel, didn't have Anchor Totem, it didn't have Totemic Surge, so the Stormbringer was kind of your best bet to do anything. Alakir the Windlord, I mean, this card, just putting in solid play is pretty accurate. The card, again, ebbs and flows and how much useful it is. Right now, it's probably at its best in a long time with the new 7 mana spell that gives your minions like +2/+3, and then you like play it with Hagatha and you play it with Shutterblock and all that. It probably is the best it's been in a long time, but it's fine. Alakir is just, big beater minion. He goes face, he swaps insects. He's just iconic in that way. Surf Finley, the Intrepid. It's Thieves play right now. It's 3 mana, 2/3, Battlecry Thief activated twice, transform all enemy minions into 1/1 Murlocs. Obviously, it's a Murloc. It's a relatively fine card. It would be better in Wild if it wasn't an Excavate card. If it's the reason this card is just not playable in Wild strictly because of the Excavate synergy. The effect itself is fucking great. Like turning all enemy minions into 1/1s is great because you have good like whirlwind effects or AoE effects in Shaman, and it's mainly just held back by Excavate cards being unplayable in Wild. Overlord Drakuru fucking sucks ass, but I mean, I guess Fringe because from the other side, that's how it's pronounced, Shaman was playable for a little while, but the issue is that it was tied strictly to Fate Spinner, I think it's called, or Fate Weaver, one or the other, and that card had its text changed to no longer, or like its interaction changed to no longer give you from the other side when you play it, because you would play from the other side, you'd summon all these minions and Fate Spinner, and then when Fate Spinner died, from the effect of the card, you would get the card back, and it was actually pretty good. And that's in Overlord Crew, obviously was in that deck, but just not anymore. Vicina, if you're overloaded, your other minions have +2 attack. I think this, I could not tell you if this card has ever seen play. I didn't even remember it was a card. I think I'm just gonna put it here. I mean, I literally don't know if I've ever seen this card be played in my entire life. Genuinely speaking, it's so bad. I think people no, I think it was tested. Here, was tested in Even Shaman, if I remember correctly, actually, because this was the same expansion Totemic Surge came out. I think this is from Old Doom. It is. So, Even Shaman had a lot of new tools in that expansion. So, of course, yeah, like you might as well test a card like Vicina. Obviously, it's just strictly worse than Stonewright, but similar effect. Corrupt the Waters. This card, I don't want to put it in best because I'm pretty sure it fell off strictly after It wasn't even. I guess I'll put it there. Craft the Waters was pretty good in standard. I wanted to put it as a saw play because like it was decent and it had like stints of being good. But I think in Old Doom when it came out, it was the best quest, and during uh Galakron's Awakening, it was the best quest actually. But like for the rest of its history, it wasn't. Uh, I think putting it in best is pretty fair though, genuinely speaking. So White Eyes, I'm gonna put in Fringe because it was Fringe in N'Zoth Shaman. I don't like I'm saying I don't remember much of N'Zoth Shaman. I don't remember seeing clips of it. Like it's one of those decks that like people talked about, but you never really saw anywhere. It feels weird to talk about. I don't know. I don't really have much to say past that. How is the Old Ascended? No, Halaziel was always terrible. Like it was terrible when it came out, and then it got buffed to have spell damage. I think it like was made a little cheaper. It used to overload you, maybe if I remember correctly, and then it's still terrible and useless and wild. Shaman doesn't want a card like this, not only because well it's 5 mana for +1 spell damage, but it's 5 mana. Shaman spells are they're not weak by any means, but they don't. If they're more efficient when they don't have a 5 mana fucking buffer to them. That's definitely a way to think of it. If this were like a priest card, it would probably be a lot better, but it's not, so it isn't. Thorim sees a lot, and I mean a lot of play in Nature Shaman and Questline Shaman and Frog Shaman and different like Shaman decks. It's genuinely a very good card. 3 mana, 3/4, Battle Cry. Unlock your overloaded mana crystals, draw the many cards. Incredible card. Will see play for its entire existence, I think, in different metas, different shapings of overload shaman decks. It will ebb and flow based on the way that the card works, but as long as we get overload burn shaman cards being printed, Thorim gets better and better. So Speaker Gidra is bad in Shaman, if I remember correctly, but I think I'm going to just put it here. Because Gidra was really good in Druid, actually. 3 mana, 1/4, Rush, Wind Fury, Spell Burst, gain attack and health equal to the spell's cost. It was really good in Token Druid decks. You would play it, and then you'd play like a 2 mana spell, and like that's just good enough to have a 3 mana, 3/6 Rush, Wind Fury. That's fine. Of course, nowadays you would never play Gidra to save your fucking life, but it's definitely was just a pretty decent card. In Shaman, I think it was like again fringe tested card during Skullament, but I can't remember specifically more than that than past Skullament. Command the Elements, obviously, fucking easily one of the best legendaries for Shaman of all time. This card made, of course, Questline Shaman, which was a genuinely powerful deck. Later on in Storm 1's lifespan, it got nerfed twice, if I remember correctly. I think it might even still be nerfed. I don't remember. No, it's not. What am I talking about? It was the last stage, I think, that got nerfed. Anyway, the card, so powerful. Questline Shaman was genuinely one of the best decks in Skullmance later on after other Questlines got nerfed. So it is fair to say this, and I think the card still saw play in going on into Alterac Valley, but most of the quest lines were unplayable during the next year because they had all been nerfed. So, yeah. Swamp Queen Hagatha at a 5/5/4. Oh, yeah. This card, I mean, it's kind of just not that good. Actually, it's kind of just strictly worse than School Teacher. School Teacher is just a strict better upgrade to Swamp Queen Hagatha. This card saw little play, very, very little play. I remember people using it in Shutter Shamans in Wild, and it was not very good, but sometimes. But you gotta remember, in Wild in the past, before you had Astalor, your best option was fucking. God, what was it? It would have been something like. Blood. What is it? The 4 mana 3/3 beast from Witchwood that drain the mosquito. I forget what that was your best option. So something like Swamp King Hagatha could sometimes give you damage, and that was maybe good enough. It wasn't great by any means, but it was something that you could do. Radiance of Ashara, again, one of the best Shaman legendaries ever. This card is so nuts for, it was great for Nature Shaman last expansion. It sees a little bit of play in Wild. And the thing is about this card is, before Drekthar was nerfed, that version of Frog Shaman ran this card, and it was fucking insane in the deck, because you would get, Radiant Elemental effect, or I guess it's whatever, the apprentice, the girl card. You would get her effect, and you would pull it with Drekthar with your Frog, and it was just very, very nuts. Genuinely such a powerful card in those decks. Still sees a little bit of play in Frog decks today, depending on the build, and in Questline decks, again, depending on the build. Brucon of the Elements is up there as well. Just a good hero card. I mean, you call the power of the Elements, and you just deal damage to their board and then deal 6 face. And then you'd get fucking 2 mana Fireball hero power, and you just do that every turn, every turn that it popped up, and your opponent would just get whittled down. And that it was really good in Shudderwock Shaman for a long time. Basically from its release until Reno came out, you would run this in Shudderwock Shaman. Obviously, with Reno, there's no reason to play this card because Reno does everything this card does, but better. But that should say one thing, that a card is so good, the only reason that you don't run it anymore is because a card that is a direct upgrade exists. Rockgill is very powerful. It saw a lot of play in standard aggro Shaman decks, with Totem Shaman. I think this card is, if Rockgill costs 4 mana, you would play it in even Shaman. That's not a question. But I think if we finally, for once, get good Murloc Shaman support, Rockgill would slot in the deck, of course. It's just a very, very, very powerful minion with a pretty insane battle cry, genuinely speaking. This is one of, most classes don't get access to a minion this strong that they can't use, is the thing. It's crazy that if Rockgill was in almost any other class, it would be one of the best minions in the entire game. But because it's in Shaman, and Shaman can't really play aggro outside of even Shaman, it just doesn't get to work. Hagatha the Fabled. I mean, I don't know what to put it as. I'm going to put it as was tested fringe, because it is. It is currently being tested as a card. It's just kind of fine. You have the interaction with the 7 mana spell that I was talking about with Alakir, where you'll give your entire deck +7 or +6 +9, I think, and you can do that. Not twice. But you could draw the spell twice off the Hagatha. But actually, no, you can't, because of Shutterlock. So you can give +12 +18 to your entire deck, and then you have Alakir with charge, and it's a 15 attack minion, so it's really fucking goofy and funny. But I think past that, the card is probably never gonna do anything special unless they really print a good big spell. But Blizzard they'll print cards like this and then never print a spell for them, and it's really fucking awkward. What's the point of printing this card and not giving it support? And they do it a lot, and I mean a lot. And then the card will rotate to Wild before a card that was synergized with it comes out, and then it's unusable in Wild because the effect is way too slow. That's how I feel like this card's going to go down. So that's why I'm going to put it in the fringe was tested tier. Fist of Rodden. This card is really goofy because there was at one point in Standard only one legendary minion that cost 1 mana. And it was Reliquary of Souls. So you would play Fist of Rodden, then you cast 4 1-mana spells, right? And then you would just keep copying your Fist of Rodden and get a shit ton of Reliquary of Souls. And it was an okay deck. It wasn't a meta defining by any means, but neither were most of these cards. You have the decks that these cards were in, So definitely perfect place to put it. Oops. Mistcaller, unplayable garbage. This is give all minions in your hand and deck 1/1 for 6 mana. It's Keleseth, but +4 mana, unplayable garbage. I don't even need to talk about it. Instructor Fireheart. This card was very, very good in its time in Standard for Shaman. It gave you access to a lot of burn, which Shaman needed. It gave you access to removal for different periods of time. It was from Skullomance, which, let me think. So it was in the same time as Command the Elements, and it went in that deck. I was just blanking on it for a second. But yeah, it's just genuinely a very powerful card for Shaman in Standard that saw a lot of play. Hagatha the Witch, again, saw a lot of play while it was in Standard, especially the first year with Shudderwalk Shaman. It was really, really good that entire time. Obviously, Hagatha's fallen off a lot, but it still saw play in Wild for a little while after it came out because, I mean, so much value, and you have to remember that Wild during Witchwood, yes, it had, or with during that year and before, and after, during Year of the Raven and Year of the, I think it was Year of the Dragon, because Rise of Shadows, Uldum, into, so Year of the Dragon was a lot slower than it is now, to the point that you could run a card like Hagatha. Of course, eventually you had Odd Paladin and Odd Rogue, which were really fast for the time, especially, but that doesn't really matter that much because Shaman Shaman at the time had good removal. It's just nowadays that old Shaman removal doesn't really matter anymore. Devolve plus Maelstrom Portal was a very, very powerful combination against those decks. So Hagatha, of course, was able to be played for its time. Scar the Catastrophe fucking sucks ass. I mean, every time someone tries to make this card work, they get 13 elementals in a row and they never draw Scar. And then they break their chain and it just sucks. The card is also it also just reads incorrectly. 7 mana, 7/7 elemental, Battlecry, deal 1 damage to all enemies. Improved by each turn in a row you've played an elemental. The way that people interpreted this card when it came out was, oh, you could play 5 elementals in a row and then not play anything for a turn, and then play Scar the next turn, and it would still deal 6 damage. Which, if that was how it worked, Scar would be a very good card. But it's not like that. It has to be a chain with elementals, which is terrible. The elemental chain mechanic has never worked. Every card that is play elementals turns in a row to work is bad. So, of course, Scar is terrible. Nidhogg, I could not tell you if this card saw play because I never saw it a single time in my entire life. 6 mana, I think it's a 4/4, Battlecry, summon 2/0/3 eggs, next turn they hatch, turn to 4/4 Drakes with Rush. I mean, that's just a terrible effect. For 6 mana and a legendary, that could be a fucking epic minion, dude. It's understated, it's just so useless, genuinely speaking. Scargill. Pre-nerf Scargill is one of the most broken cards ever put in this video game. It's so degenerate. Genuinely so degenerate. What it did to Shudderwalk Shaman needs to be studied because of how fucking degenerate this card was. It made Shudderwalk Shaman go from being you got this kind of Battlecry heavy control deck to being draw your Murlocs and you win the game, don't draw your Murlocs and you lose the game every single time. It was so fucking gross. You'd play this with Clownfish, you'd play a full hand of Murlocs, draw 6 cards for negative mana because all your Murlocs cost 1 and Clownfish's effect would work through this, so they would cost 0. It was so degenerate. You'd clear your board with Flurgle, you'd eat your opponent's entire hand with Mutanus and Bouncing Mutanus and Parrots. It was so gross. I genuinely wish that Scargill had never been printed just so we could never interact with that, because Scargill was completely useless in Murloc decks all throughout its history, and it's only ever been good in that one Shudderwalk Shaman deck, and it was so fucking degenerate. In the sees play, sees play in Standard. It's not that great in Nature Shaman right now. I think it was playable in older versions of the list, so putting it in Saw play definitely makes sense. It's 5/5 Battlecry. Rest of the game removal cards cost 1 less. I mean, that's just a strong effect. It will probably see play at least one more time before it rotates, so I think putting in Saw play definitely makes sense. Grand Totem Eyesore. When Totem Shaman was really good in Standard, last rotation, this card was in Standard at the time, so of course it slotted into that deck. I guess it's at the same level as Rockgill, but yeah, I mean, Eyesore and Rockgill go hand in hand because they were both in that Totem Shaman deck, and it was pretty good. Maybe I'll just put them here, actually. Saw play. I guess they're not technically the best. Neptulon obviously fucking sucks. 7 mana, 7/7, Battlecry, add 4 Murlocs to your hand, overload 3. Do I need to explain why that card is terrible? Bandersmosh also sucks. 5 mana, 5/5,
Each turn that's in your hand transform into a 5/5 copy of a random legendary minion. It's like fucking Shifter Xeris, but even worse. It's just, I mean, like, come on, dude. Like, what is this card? Like, what are these terrible Shaman legendaries? Lady Vosh. Lady Vosh saw play, 3 mana, 4/3, spell damage +1, shuffle Vosh Prime into your deck. It saw play throughout its run in Standard just because it was a good minion. It would, the Vosh Prime effect would, it would draw 3 spells from your deck, and I think they would cost 3 less, which, yeah, was pretty good. You would just do that, you would get burn. Vosh also had spell damage +1, and that was pretty decent. Galakron, Galakon the Tempest. This card was unbelievably broken on release. It was arguably one of the best decks to ever exist in Standard, with Galakron, Shudder, Shaman with Corrupt the Waters and all that. One of the best decks to ever exist in Standard because of this card, not because of like Corrupt the Waters, but even though it was in the deck, it was strictly because of Galakron the Tempest. So broken. It was unreal. Electra Storm Surge. I'm going to put it here. Fringe was tested. In theory, if Electra had existed at almost any other point in time in Standard, it probably would have been a decent card. But, I mean, coming out in Boomsday, didn't really have anything to double cast. And same all the way up through its eventual rotation, just didn't have anything to cast. And nowadays, it's just pointless. I mean, yeah, it was Fringe. It was tested in like Elemental decks for burn. It's just not very useful whatsoever. Zentimo. I'm going to put a Saw play. Zentimo, sees Fringe play every once in a while. When Wind Chill came out, Zentimo was actually like a pretty hyped card, and we saw a lot of play with Wind Chill. But like nowadays, you don't really play Zentimo ever. Cold Storage also made Zentimo a little bit better, but there's just no point to play it. It doesn't really actually do anything for you, even though in theory it's such a strong effect. It just doesn't actually do anything for you because you have to draw those spells, and like there are very few spells that actually synergize with Zentimo. Cookie the Cook. So Cookie the Cook was like kind of I'm gonna put another to meh. Yeah, so Cookie the Cook's kind of just a meh card. I mean, I don't really have anywhere to put it because it wasn't really Fringe. It wasn't really that tested, but like, it's not a terrible card by any means. Like I guess just Fringe or was tested fits it the best. It was tested in like Shutterwalk Shamans, and it was a meh card in those decks. Like a lot of these cards were like kind of okay, like they're Fringe or were like they were pretty decent in Fringe decks, but Cookie was just kind of meh overall. Shutter Block, I'm going to put as Saw play. Saw / Seize. I don't care. Yeah, Saw play because it is currently seeing a little bit of play in Standard. It's just not at the level for me to put it at something like Best yet because it's only been around for one expansion. I don't think it would be fair to put it as a Best one, but it'll probably be one of the best legendaries in as we go on these next 2 years for Standard. It'll probably be one of the best for it, and maybe get nerfed because I mean that's a pretty crazy effect. Tendril Shaman is a deck that you can play. It's not amazing, but it's really fun more than anything else. Golganath the Thunderer, easily one of the best Shaman minions to ever exist. I mean, it's so good. It goes in everything. It goes in Shudder Shaman. It goes in, I think Nature Shaman runs it. It goes in Even Shaman. It's just so good. It's obviously a Titan, so you have all the Titan effects, and then your first spell cost 3 less. Actually adds up a lot for a lot of different decks. Unite the Murlocs. Fringe was tested kind of card. I mean, it's just not actually that good. Murloc decks don't actually want to play this. They would rather just play a 1-drop. And they don't really need value because Murlocs are a value generation tribe. So getting something like Megafin doesn't actually do anything for you because you have Howdy Fin, you have Underbelly Angler, you have so many cards that already give you value anyway that it's just completely useless. Bolner Hammerbeak, obviously one of the best legendaries ever. I mean, this card is so good. It's 2 mana Bran at its worst, And at its best, you just eat your opponent's entire hand with Mutanus spam, Mutanus Battlecry spam. So broken, literally unreal how good this card is. Genuinely make it's one of the reasons why Shadow Shaman is so strong. Genuinely, fucking great card. Kragwa. I think putting Kragwa in like Fringe makes the most sense because you had like these spell like value shaman decks at the time that were kind of just Fringe. They weren't great. Kragwa was kind of just meh. If Kragwa was like 3 mana, it would be a lot better. But a lot of these like cards that try to synergize with spells and shaman just don't work because shaman doesn't actually have that good of spells. They have like, how do I put this? Shaman has really, really good nature spells that are good at burning down your opponent, and that's all they're good at. The rest of the Shaman spells are like, one and done, like single pump kind of spells, and they don't really matter to copy because if you're playing Kragwa, you want to play a lot of spells all at once, and it doesn't really work that well doing that because, again, if you're playing a lot of spells in one turn, you're probably killing your opponent, so Kragwa doesn't actually do anything. Grumble is obviously great. It was insane, and like Shutterwalk Shaman, of course, it would let you go infinite. You could kill your opponent through infinite shutters eventually, and it was just pretty decent. I mean, there's nothing more else to say about it. Didn't really see play until Shutter came out, if I remember correctly. But like, it's just fine. It's just a fine card, and obviously, it still sees play in Shutter today. So, Alcure. The Winds of Time. I don't know where to put it, really. It was tested in Shutterwalk Shaman, but it's the same thing as Brucon, where it was tested, and then fucking Showdown the Badlands came around, and there was no point to play it. That's kind of just what it is. It was fine. You would give your hero Divine Shield, and that was actually pretty cool to get Divine Shield for your hero on just a 2-mana hero power, but not that great otherwise. Ra's Frost Whisper saw play in like a lot of different like spell damage kind of decks in Shaman and Mage. It's just a pretty good card. At the end of your turn, deal 1 damage to all enemies by spell damage, 5 mana, 3/6. Just a lot of damage would get pushed by this card with the spell damage totem being in the game at the time before being taken out. And then you had, Imprisoned Phoenix, which would let you set up for Ra's and let you set up for your burn turns. It's just a very, 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 good card in those decks. It's not the best because it doesn't have like any prolific status to it. Didn't see play for a very long time. It wasn't like easily the best card in decks. It's just kind of okay. Rune Sphere, fucking terrible. 8 mana, 3/3 weapon. After your hero attacks, discover a spell and cast it with random targets. Obviously a terrible card. I mean, it's obviously bad. It's fucking 8 mana. Baroness Vosh, yeah, you saw that. Saw a little bit of play in like Evolved Shaman decks that existed in Nathria, where you would, evolve. And the decks kind of fell off after Null got nerfed, but it was still a fine card in those decks. I guess I should call it more like, I'm going to put it there, saw play. Then you have Baron Glacier. No, this card is fucking terrible, dude. I remember people thought this card would be broken on release. I'm like, dude, is this not like one of the worst cards ever made? 7 mana, 6/6 Battlecry for each frost spell you've cast this game. Summon a 3/4 elemental is obviously fucking terrible. I mean, playing frost spells isn't something you do a lot of, especially when this card came out. I think it was like just Windchill was the only playable frost spell because all the other frost spells sucked. So there's no reason to ever play this card. Thrall Deathseer. Oh, no. I mean, it was like Fringe was tested in like Evolved Shaman decks. I guess I'll put Vosh there. But at the time, but Evolved Shaman really wasn't that crazy good for a long time. Like, the best time for Evolved Shaman ever was during Doom in the Tomb and during... Oh God, what was it? It was when Bogspine Knuckles was like really good with Darkmoon Fair, I think. Yeah, I think that's when Evolved Shaman was at its best. Otherwise, Evolved Shaman hasn't been that good in Standard. In Wild, you would never play Thrall in any Evolved Shaman deck ever, so it just never really was useful. But again, Bogspine Knuckles really is the best evolved card to ever exist. So, and then lastly but not least, you have Shutterwalk. Shutterwalk is by far the best Shaman legendary. I mean, how do I say this? You have played a deck called Shutterwalk Shaman since 2017 or 2018. That's how long you've been playing Shutterwalk, and it's been at least fringe playable ever since. There's never been a time where Shutterwalk Shaman is completely unplayable. It is just like at worst, it'll be like a tier 4 or 5 deck, and at best, it's the best deck in the entire game, and it kind of meta warps to the point of toxicity. Yes, Shutterwalk is known widely as a meme to be the worst card in Shutterwalk Shaman, but it's just really funny. Especially during the Murloc era, it actually was the worst card in the entire deck, but you'd still play it because obviously it's your finisher card. Shutterwalk Shaman decks nowadays use Shutterwalk just as a finisher. They just tempo you down, they beat you up. They don't even need to play Shutterwalk to win the game. It's just a finisher card, and that's probably the best way to play a card like this. Going infinite and trying to build just around Shutter doesn't work anymore. It's kind of too slow. It's too prominent to disruption. If you low roll and your Shutter doesn't get copied, it's really bad that way. Usually you can deal with that with cold storage, but going like the dupe copying on your Shutterwalk is just not very useful. You just want to kill your opponent with your Shutterwalk. You'll set up like a big board, and then their spells will cost 5, and their minions or battlecry minions will cost 5 more, and like all their stuff will cost extra mana, and then they can't really deal with your big board, and then you also repeat your Reno Lone Hero, your Reno Lone Ranger hero power, and stuff like that, and it's like, wow, this card just... It's Shutterwalk, all right. Yeah, if you enjoy, make sure to tell me in the comments below. If you like, comment, subscribe. If you think I got any of these strictly wrong, any of them right, if I missed any legendaries because of the Blizzard website, please tell me below, and then I'll just say what I would think it would be. But yeah, thanks. See ya.